one of the things I heard was that the Bible was based off of another book from us, but from my research, it's just based off of the Sumerian tablets.
So you're saying that the Bible was what?
I was told that the Bible was based off of an older book that was only actually related to us as being melanated people only, and that, but from my research, I only see the Bible as a copy from the Sumerian tablets.
No.
So I want to know if that's true.
All right. So remember when you were saying that we said, or I explained to you that ancient Egypt, well, people call Egypt anyway, predates the Sumerian tablets. But the reality is that when you look at the Bible, it's coming from Egypt, meaning that the ties to Egypt in the Bible should give you the answer or the clue. Like, why does Egypt play such a prominent part in the Bible? Meaning that everyone went to Egypt. Moses was supposedly found in a basket in Egypt. Abraham went to Egypt. Joseph and his whole family were in Egypt. Jesus was taken to hide in Egypt. The reason is because the whole concept of the Bible comes from Egypt in terms of the basic stories. Like, you have the sun. When you really look at the sun, as in the most popular person in the Bible is this Son of God. But what they've done is they've superimposed the SON over the SUN, because it's really talking about the sun, as in the sun that is 93 million miles away, created 93 billion years ago. That is the sun. Without the sun, no one will survive on the planet. So when you look at it, everything relates to the sun, and that's where you get the prominent characters are Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and that ties into, when you say horizon, you're saying Horus is rising, dealing with the son of God, right? And Osiris, if you look at the O and the beginning of the word of Osiris, that's dealing with the sun. And when they talk about Jesus walking on the water, etc., that's when you see the sun rising, it seems to traverse the sky on the water. You see the halo that Jesus and most of these characters have around their head, that's relating to the sun. The solar plexus, where you see, they always show like a picture of Jesus with this light emanating from his heart seat, which is dealing with the solar plexus. Solar relates to the sun. So the entire Bible is based on the stories of ancient Egypt. Even when you look at Heliopolis, which is dealing with the city of the sun. So you have Thebes, Heliopolis, and Memphis. That's all dealing with, Helios deals with the sun. So when you go to ancient Egypt and look at how significant the sun was, is that the sun gave the rays that heal everyone. And even till today, if you read, the books of Malachi chapter 4, which is, the ending of what they call the Old Testament, it's talking about the sun of righteousness coming with healing in its wings. This is all related to the sun. And that's why we say that it ties into ancient Egypt. The monotheistic religions, the Western religions, all come from the sun, because even in Islam, for example, their prayers that they say they do every day, the 5 prayers, they can't do that without the motion of the sun, because you need to know what time it is to do Maghrib, to do Al-Fatiha, to do these prayers, and to do, so everything's based on the motion of the sun. Now, what happens is that when you start to look at the sun, you're dealing with the sun cycle, and then you have the moon cycle. And 6 ether beings that existed in the last 6,000 years, they turned everything backwards to moon worship. So it's because the moon doesn't have any light, because they know that without the sun there is no life. So they deal with dead, or they worship the dead. And this is where even the Book of the Dead, as they call it, comes from the coming forth by day, which is the book that they now term the Book of the Dead. And then you start to look at, we did a video actually called The Book of the Dead, which deals with how they've turned everything into sixth ether, into moon worship. And so they try to, the dead, as in the ghost, being their version of the sun, which is, they say, God the Father, God the Son, which is obviously the SON, and then the Holy Ghost, because the ghost is a dead being that they give the energies to. So in that regard, all the religions come from ancient Egypt. And the Sumerians are just like a bridge before it becomes the monotheistic religion, because they chose Abraham from Mesopotamia, and the Anunnaki chose him as their patriarch to push the ghost worship. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, it does. So then, because I told you before, like I have a calling in my soul, or like a guy that keeps telling me I need to go to Egypt. But why do I keep hearing about this whole thing of America is the original? I don't feel anything in this land.
Yeah, I know, but that's now what it is. Remember, we had Tamaray, Egypt of the West. That's the whole point why the master put it in America, so that people didn't have to go all the way to Egypt. Obviously, your DNA and your ancestors are tied into ancient Egypt, but those same ancestors were the same ones that owned what we call America today. So you have the same bloodline tied to America, and the whole point of putting Tamaray of the West in the US was so that people can go there and perform and experience Egypt in its fullness, and perform the spiritual rituals like the Mugaraj to connect them back with their ancestors. Or, you know, we used to say that when you did that inner journey.
Oh, so does this mean like is the master teacher then it sounds like a kind of like the Egyptian wars with Sumerian tablets, in the sense of I can't remember his name, but he was one of the sons of the Anunnaki at that time. But he came to America.
That's right.
And he started up over here.
Yes, and this is what I'm saying to you, that if you study, right, even the name, like, let me just give you a little excerpt from the same book I just mentioned called The Coming Forth by Day, right? The first picture on the page you turn to, I'm gonna put it up so you can see it, right? Shows you the pharaoh, right? This pharaoh's name is Amunubi Ra'akata, right? This is another name that describes the master teacher. Now, when you break that word down, Amun Nubi Ruakta, right? It translates as the faithful informer, soul of the Pataites. So, what I'm saying is, he's that Patar, that soul that we are all connected to as the rays of the sun. And when you start to read, and he enacted a ritual that was not done for over 10,000 years. This was bringing in this sun cycle as Osiris, okay? Who is obviously the deity that I was just mentioning, that, you know, the monotheistic religions grafted, and they actually dug up, you know, Osiris and took DNA and everything. And once they find him, it confirms that his family existed, i.e. his wife being Isis, his son Horus, and the whole thing about Jesus comes from that story, but it ties into Amun as well, right? Because Amun is that son, that being that kept reincarnating over and over again. So, yeah, this is where the Egyptian mystery schools had the original, what we call the higher mysteries, and the lower mysteries were taught to the Europeans, and this is how they basically grafted their religions from. And it ties into the whole thing with the lighthouse and the phallus, because when you look at the minaret, or you look at the what they call the obelisk. That is tying into the story of Horus, because remember the whole thing with Seth and Osiris is that Seth tricked his brother Osiris, and then tricked him into. He basically said he got him a present, which was this beautiful sarcophagus, which he was basically saying that he's going to give it to him as a present. He told him to get inside of it to see if it fitted, but he was betrayed, and then he got chopped up into 14 pieces and then scattered all over Egypt. And as the story goes, obviously Isis had to find the pieces and put them back together. And
Right.
the last piece that was found was his phallus. And through rituals, this is how Horus was born. And then he was able to, this is where the whole Madonna and child comes in, because it's really talking about Isis and Horus. And the whole thing was that he was going to grow up and revenge his father. And that's
Right.
that's kind of like what happened. But that phallus is where it's symbolically referring to the penis, and that's why you see all the religious buildings in the monotheistic religions will have a dome. The dome represents the mammary gland, or the female breast when she was suckling Horus, and then of course the what they call the obelisk, which we knew as the benben. When you break down the word benben, you see how it ties into Islam and into monotheistic religions, Hebrew, with Ibn or Ben, as in Ben, when you're dealing with the
Right.
sun. That's what Ben
Right.
Ben refer, the son of a son, which you're really dealing with, the son of Osiris being a son and Horus being a son. So you say Ben Ben, or the son of a son. And as I said, it ties into the city of the sun, dealing with, it's all Egyptian stories that have been relayed but copied over to.
And these are all Anunnaki, essentially, right?
No, that's what I'm saying. That the Anunnaki stories pick up with that story that I've just given you being broken into Damuzi being like the father, and then you
Okay.
have Ishtar being Isis, and then you have Tammuz as your Horus story. You see, so it's
Gotcha.
like the same story being remixed and being retold throughout different cultures, but it becomes the Anunnaki story because, as you said, you're dealing with Tammuz. Tammuz now
Right.
being that Jesus figure, and obviously, as I said, Damuzi being his father, and then Ishtar, and that Ishtar ties into Esther, into Easter, where people are celebrating Easter in Christianity, but that's going back to Ishtar, you see, and she's known by many names throughout the different cultures, just like, Horus is known by many names and Osiris is known by many names, but ultimately, yeah, to answer your question,
Right.
those are Egyptian mystery stories that have been basically grafted into the Anunnaki stories and then into the monotheistic religions by way of Abraham.
Oh, wow. So you're saying, though, that they have nothing to do with the Anunnaki whatsoever. They're not Anunnaki.
Who's that?
The Egyptian.
No, they're not. The thing is, this is one of the biggest problems
That's
because
crazy.
a lot of people are relating to the Anunnaki because a lot of people are under the school of religion. And so when you then tie the tablets where these stories are copied from that have been actually found, it goes into these Anunnaki tablets. So a lot of people are familiar with Anunnaki, but when you start to talk about the Parnatharu, the overseers, the beings that actually
Right.
came to this planet first and seeded this planet, our ancestors, many people are not familiar with that because we're starting to teach that information, and this is what Parna Babyanun started to give us because we walked past the Anunnaki stories, the Sumerian stories, and then he was starting to go
Right.
into our stories, and then because at that point it was like becoming clearer and clearer, he got kidnapped, and so we still learned throughout those schools he was giving us. He would still introduce us to, like Ptah and Bes, and it will introduce us to, the sun, because when you look at the motion of the sun, this became that whole aton, and amun, and then he explained about the nun, or the waters where you go under. So that motion of the sun rising all comes from the positions of the sun in ancient, what we call Tamaray, as Atumre, Atunre, Amunre. You see, and this is what became known by the Sumerians as the three positions of the sun, as Apsu, Tamat, and Shamash. You see, so you can literally align the stories of the Sumerian being taken from ancient Egypt. But when they flip mode it, people were taught that the Sumerians were the beginning or the first, which is not actually true, because many
Right.
artifacts have been found in Shinar or Sumer, or in the Sumerian regions, that are from Egypt, and they predate a lot of the Sumerian. And you can find this in, we have a book called, the language, of time. Yeah, so that book goes into the details of what I'm saying.